Welcome to Simply Happy Conversations, a podcast that teaches you how to create a clutter-free, functional and simply happy life. I'm Narelle King, a professional organiser who helps families take practical steps to simplify their lives and create a more organised home. I'm passionate about supporting neurodivergent families and individuals like myself. Every fortnight, I also share guest conversations with experts passionate about the future of our home, health, and the planet, which will provide you with actionable takeaways to create a more organised and happy life. Mornings can be hectic with kids, but add ADHD and you can have a recipe for chaos. A shoe missing, school bag not in the correct spot, sensory challenges around eating breakfast, forgetting steps to get ready, everybody's running late. Today on the podcast, I'm talking with Jenny, an educational therapist and the founder of We Thrive Learning. They specialise in supporting ADHD students. Jenny shares mistakes parents, caregivers and teachers make at home and in school when they're supporting ADHD students, and how to increase motivation and strategies to support your ADHD child with organisation at home and school. This conversation is a video recording that you can watch on YouTube. Let's jump into this Simply Happy guest conversation. Today on Simply Happy Conversations, I'm joined by Jenny, an educational therapist for We Thrive Learning. They specialise in supporting ADHD students, and Jenny is going to share with us today mistakes parents, caregivers and teachers make at home, at school, and maybe also share some strategies to support your ADHD child with organisation.
Hi, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for having me, Narelle.
Oh, no, thank you so much for joining. It's so lovely to have you here on the other side of the world and joining us. So maybe start with, so we can get to know you a little bit. If you were a Barbie doll, what two accessories would you come with?
Oh, so funny. So I would definitely bring a book. I'm an avid reader, love reading fiction and nonfiction. And I would also bring my running shoes. I'd love to be outdoors, love to run, love to stay active. And yeah, I'd bring both of those.
So would running be your first choice of activity outside?
Yeah, running. I also like exploring different foods. So I don't cook myself, but love eating and going to restaurants.
Oh, nice. I love that. Have you got a particular type of food that you enjoy the most?
Ooh, I love pizza. I love Latin, love Asian. Just love it all, really.
Yeah. A variety, like trying different things.
Yes. Yeah.
So if I could work with you as a professional organizer, what area in your life would you love the support with organizing? It can be business or home.
My brain just needs someone to come in here and try to organize it a bit and prioritizing, because I tend to think everything needs priority now. And I tend to try to multitask, and I know that doesn't work. So even though I preach this, I don't always do it. I try to multitask a lot, and that's not the most effective.
No, I just struggle with it. Even though I try to do it in the morning, but it doesn't work. You know, I'm cooking breakfast, getting lunch ready, and jumping between and trying to eat breakfast to your actual self as well. But it doesn't work very well. Does it?
Exactly.
So what are your strengths that you bring to We Thrive Learning that actually make it like a unique service?
Yeah, so we are a team of educational therapists and coaches. So we pride ourselves in supporting neurodiverse students. So we teach them evidence-based practices, really understand their cognitive profiles. I think that's what makes us so special. And then we also blend coaching techniques because we specialize with students who have ADHD. And when I mean coaching techniques, we're taking off more of like the educational therapy hat and putting much more of a coach's hat, where we're asking our students questions, getting curious and helping them to problem solve. So our approach is unique because we blend both together. And I think that's what makes it so impactful.
Yeah, because you do hear a lot of adults going and seeing an ADHD coach, but it's not really advertised for children, is it? It's more the therapist approach and education approach.
Exactly. Yeah. So we start with ADHD coaching around fifth grade is typically when we start with students because developmentally they're ready by then to begin.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So maybe then share with us some of the insights of the anatomy of the ADHD brain.
Yeah. Okay. So this is so important, I think, for teachers and parents and everyone for really to know. because, ADHD is almost that, diagnosis that is seen the physical, we physically see it, right? So when people think of ADHD, they tend to think of the hyperactive boy, who is, just has more energy, right? Impulsive. They tend to interrupt more. However, boys and girls can have the rates of people who have ADHD is the same among gender. And so recently we've been finding that girls are being diagnosed at faster rates. And it's not because girls have more ADHD now. It's just because the literature has caught up with society, and society is understanding a lot more about the symptoms of ADHD. And so girls who used to mask the inattentive type, because there's the hyperactive and the inattentive type, and then there's the combination type, girls tend to fall much more in the inattentive type, simply because they know how to play into society's norms, right? However, the ADHD brain, I'd say, is really unique because they have an overactive amygdala, okay? So especially in their teen years, and what I mean by amygdala is the emotional part of their brain, right? So really empathetic, really sensitive, tend to react much more, escalate things and catastrophize. And then they also have their prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain, right, that lays right behind our forehead, tends to be 30% developmentally behind their peers. Okay, so for example, if a child is 10 years old, in some ways, not in all ways, but in some ways, that part of the brain will be functioning like a 7 or 6-year-old, just to put things into context. So when we say the 10-year-old is having trouble, raising their hand in class or responding back to their peers, they may present themselves like a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old at times. Same thing with an 18-year-old, right? Parents are really frustrated because they said, I told him, I reminded him to do this so many times, still didn't do it. And when we put things into context, we're like, well, would we expect a 12-year-old to behave in this way? And we would, right? So just because the child may look physically like an 18-year-old does not think all their cognitive processes, those executive function skills, are developed like an 18-year-old. And our brain develops from back to front. And so when the part behind our forehead is the last part of the brain to develop, so it's going to take some time for these skills to really cook. For a quote unquote neurotypical brain, it's around mid-20s. For someone who has ADHD, we want to add 30% on top of that.
Which is great. It's great to have that understanding, because then you're, a lot kinder to yourself, like for myself, or to, your children or people you're teaching as well. If there's education, teachers listening, just being mindful because teaching, say, those grade 6 boys, and it's like, oh, why are they doing that? And it's like, well, actually they're probably acting like, grade 3, grade 2 boys, aren't they?
Exactly. Yeah. So it helps us understand them more. And once we perceive it differently, we approach the situation much differently. Yeah,
definitely. Sorry. So if a child is, say, struggling with motivation, because that's a real problem sometimes, isn't it? You'll hear, it's boring, it's too hard, the things that I hear. And it's really that motivation to get started as well. And it's, and I see it as an organizer with adults I work with. What's some things that are contributing to that?
So it varies by person, and every person is unique and different, right? But I think when someone's struggling with motivation, at the heart of it is a feeling where we procrastinate because we're avoiding a feeling, right? So it could, like you said, the challenge of it, or the boredom, or the unknown could be a feeling you don't want to enter. And so we need to get curious. Kids will not always be verbal. They may not know why they're putting things off. And so we need to really be observant. So as their coaches, we really work with students on helping them and their families to figure out what truly is coming in the way. Sometimes we take it all the way back and we realize it's sleep. The child isn't getting enough sleep. Or nutrition, when was the last time the child drank water, right? These are just some, I'd say, some physiological things that the child needs. But then we also come to, the path is pretty gray, right? When a child with ADHD has a gray path, they will not hit go. And so we really need to figure out, okay, do they have a clear understanding of the expectations and how to get to the end? right? If they only know the end product, but they can't really break it down, the chunks, then they're not going to get started. It's the unknown. Maybe the task is too difficult, so we need to make the task easier or figure out what resources they need to make this easier. So there are many different factors that could come in the way. Honestly, it could be as simple as, there are too many steps in bringing out the supplies right now. And I know that sounds so silly, right? Because that's like that's the first step we need to do. But for children and adults who really struggle with executive function skills, thinking about all the things that they need to do to even get started is a lot. And if we break it down into micro steps, we can come up with a list of steps that they need to do. And so for these kids, it's hard for them to juggle everything that they need to do at once. And it's overwhelming. So they need support.
Yeah, definitely. And I see this with adults as well, in particular with organization. If we can put some of those steps in place and have a clear path for them, it makes it a lot easier for them to get started. And it's like finishing those loops. You know how you'll have a loop of things. So if we can get started and try and finish a loop, they're going to have that motivation to keep going, aren't they?
Exactly. And I think parent acknowledgement is so important here too, for us to recognize what they're doing well so they continue to do more of that.
Definitely. Encouragement goes such a long way, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
So what are some of the mistakes that you see with parents and kids?
And I think this could go for teachers as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely teachers.
Yeah. Well, one is I don't think understanding enough about ADHD, right? Because then we tend to, and no fault to the adults in their lives, but we tend to come back and, get upset. We're also triggered. If your child has ADHD, very likely someone else in the family has ADHD, like a caregiver. And so, we're working with our own triggers as well, right? So the way we react to the child is very important because the amount of no's that the child hears from the world and the amount of no's that they tell themselves is exponentially, it's high, right? And so we really need to be mindful about how we're responding to these kids rather than reacting. And for us to really have a good understanding of what ADHD is, so that we can intervene, provide the right type of support, interventions, and help this child, right? So I think that's one thing. We need to get more knowledgeable in teachers and parents. Secondly, and again, I think because our world, we're fast-paced, right? Everything we move at is at a fast. We're fast. And so, we're always on the go. We're always busy. And because of that, we tend to put Band-Aid strategies on our students, our children. So for example, if a child is constantly forgetting to put their backpack away, we're reminding them or doing it for them, right? We're telling them what to do. And that's not going to create lasting change for this child because, it's very passive. Someone telling them what to do or constantly reminding them. Instead, what we want to do is ask the child questions. So we wanted to get them to learn how to be problem solvers, right? So, how are they going to remember to put their backpack away after school daily? And this is something we need to collaborate with them on. So rather than telling them every day what to do, we want to shift the responsibility to them so that they can begin to think about, okay, what am I going to do to put my backpack away? And maybe there's a natural consequence in place, right? What will happen if I don't put my backpack away? I'm not saying a punishment, but a natural consequence to it. Maybe it's, they can't find it the next day because no one put it back for them, right? And then they're spending time looking for it and that takes up their free time in the morning. I'm not sure what it could be, but we always want them to be included in the problem solving and for us to ask more questions rather than telling them what to do.
Yeah, no, I find that one in particular with families I work with is the backpack or the clothes and the shoes at the start of the day. And so it's breaking it down and looking at, asking the child the questions. So there's a door and the door, they'll be like, yeah, but I can't open it properly. It's like, oh, what about if we put a little cube unit here and we put your things. Would that be better? Oh my gosh, that would be so much better. Just asking because you don't know what that little bit is that's stopping them. So trying to create that functional space for them can, just make that job so much easier for them.
Exactly. Yeah. The space needs to be functional, right? I always tell parents it needs to be fast and it needs to be easy.
Yes.
Because if it's Amazing. It's not going to get done.
Yes. If you've got to take lids off or open containers or something like that, it's not going to happen. I'm always like, just take the lid off. I'm sure that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, exactly. We need to just make it as easy as possible.
Definitely, definitely. So if a child was in their home or even at school, what's some things that parents or teachers could do to help them with their organisation?
I think teachers do a pretty incredible job of keeping their classroom pretty structured, right? Especially in the primary grades. There's always an order, a routine for how things happen. We want to mimic as much as we can routine and structure at home to maintain the organization. I know this is really hard, especially for neurodivergent parents who also struggle with it themselves. But I think if we're transparent with our kids and say, this is something I'm also struggling with too, and this is something I'm continuing to work on, that gives them space, right, to try these strategies and to not feel like they're the only ones who struggle here. We also want to, so if that is you want to find a way to build some sort of consistency for yourself and your child while being gracious and compassionate, right? Because we know that this is part of the struggle with ADHD. We're constantly inconsistent. Secondly, I think it's also making it easy, like you said, and then also having visual reminders somewhere. So, if a child doesn't hear it, they need a visual for it. Most of the time, students who have ADHD will have issues with working memory and processing challenges. And so anything that is said verbally must have a visual component tied to it. Otherwise, the child will forget. And you can say it immediately, and the child will turn around and completely forget what you said. And it's no fault to them, right? It's just how their brain is wired. So we need to have these bypass strategies for them to be able to support them.
Oh, definitely. Like I could be in the kitchen and I'll turn around to the fridge and I'll be like, I can't even remember what I'm trying to get, and turn back and go, oh, that's right. Now I've seen that trigger, which will usually be a visual, and be able to go back and get what it was that I needed. So I completely get, how children are, especially, having an ADHD brain myself, that, the forgetting like instantly what it was that you were going to be doing. So visual reminders are huge and work so well. And being a teacher, I think that's one of the things that I bring to my job, like actually as a professional organizer, because I understand what the classrooms are like and how organized, and all those little strategies that teachers use. It's so good to use in a home, is one of the,
yeah. If it's working for the child in school, a lot of parents look like students who have in the USA, we call them an IEP plan or a 504 plan. Is like an educational plan, right? So whatever the educational plan has in place, the family, we need to try to find creative ways on how we can implement those same accommodations at home, right? So how do we change them so that they're mirrored at home? Obviously, they're not going to be like the classrooms, but if it's working for your child, those systems in place at school, that means we need to figure out how to make them work at home as well. The work is continuous, right? It doesn't just stop at when school ends. We need to continue the support.
Yeah, the families I see that it works, the best is the ones that sort of do mimic a lot of the school things. They'll have labels, which schools have labels on lots of their things, whether it's visual or in writing. And then, the, what are they called? Like a timetable type thing, a planner that's showing a visual of what's expected, works so well in schools. And so why not have that sort of thing? It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but in our homes, whether it's at the front door the minute they're leaving, or, somewhere in their kitchen area where they can see it. Maybe actually we've just implemented on my son's phone, because he's sort of teenager, a calendar, so he can now see it digitally rather than the visual one, which we've been relying on for the last, 12 years. But he's on his phone. So, and the other thing I've started doing is texting him, and just texting him the reminder of what's happening today, rather than me having to, verbally tell him, because then I might get a PDA response as well. So this way I'm actually, just trying to tune in with the age appropriate and the things that they're at the moment.
Exactly. Yeah. Once your child starts developing, I think the teen years get very fun and interesting because we need to kind of start thinking about how do we shift it from us being much more of the director to now them being much more of the director. And I think that part's really hard for families because we're scared that something's going to, if we're not in it, if we're not in the trenches, something's going to fall off. Right. And I think that's a huge growth opportunity for students to play with because they need to be able to trust themselves, the strategies that they're using, and kind of figure things out on their own. And we absolutely want to be there to support them. We just don't want to be doing the work for them or the reminders for them. So I think changing it so it's developmentally appropriate is very important.
And so how do you support parents? Do you get to support parents around that as well?
Yeah, we actually have a Facebook group for parents, but we also where everything is free. And then for students who are on board in our program, we'll meet with parents one-on-one to sort of support this. So we've had parents in the past who, no fault to them, but who have been coming and emailing their universities as if they were the child and checking the emails, right? So it's this is we need to start letting go of the child slowly. And again, this is so scary for parents. But this is where the coaching comes in, where we can say, okay, if you can trust us to take over this part of it, right? And then we slowly start letting go of the reins. Now this child will begin to develop these skills, knowing that we're there also to support them, helping them to be accountable and also checking in with them. We don't want the child to become reliant on the support, and by no means are we taking on the role of a parent. We are truly coaching the kids to figure out what strategies work for them and how they're going to remember to use them.
I love that. I love that Facebook group and giving them the support so that they can loosen the reins and let the child be independent.
Yeah, and it's so hard because we're used to it, right? We're used to telling them what to do all the time from sensitive toddlers. And now they're older and all of a sudden they want to be their own person, and we need to start playing with letting go.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got one last question. So what's one thing the listeners could do to help children and teens be more independent then?
I think just ask questions rather than telling, ask questions. If a child says, I can't find my shoes, we ask them the question, like, well, where would your shoes be? Right? We don't want to go and show them where we put them away. I think the more we ask questions, the more the child will begin to problem solve, and the brain strengthens what it uses, right? So we want them to really strengthen their problem solving skills. And then also the child will learn how to trust themselves. So a strategy that works for them, right? And then they'll tweak and adjust the strategy to perfect it or improve it. But it's not going to be coming from us. And I think that's what's most important. That will also help the relationship between the child and the parent, by far.
Definitely. Oh, that's a great point to finish with. Thank you so much, Jenny, for your time. And so how can people connect with you?
Thank you so much for having me. This was lovely. But yes, if you're interested in coaching for your child or interested in learning, you can visit us at wethrivelearning.com.
And are you obviously accessible to the whole world because it's online?
Yes.
Which is fantastic.
Yes, we start with students in 4th grade and all the way to college. So we just ask that the child be in school. And if we don't have the support for them, then we'll refer them to another clinician.
Sure. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for today's Simply Happy conversation. If you find yourself wasting precious time searching for misplaced items and wishing for a more organized life, then you need my 5-minute declutter ebook, the ultimate guide to quick and easy organizing solutions for a clutter-free and happy home. Forget about spending months KonMariing your house. These fun solutions are designed to give you immediate results in under 5 minutes. Head over to Simply Happy in the resource section and download your free copy and start seeing results in minutes. I'd like to acknowledge the Wathaurong people of the Kulin Nation on which this podcast is recorded as the traditional custodians of the land. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.